This is Reason.
James.
And Aaron.
And we're here to talk about a time where cultural change took place in America. Stay tuned and you'll hear about the Harlem Renaissance, how it came to be, and the effects Langston Hughes had on it. To understand the Harlem Renaissance, you have to first understand how it started.
Do explain, Reason.
Well, with the emergence of World War I and the U.S. entering the war, labor and factory jobs were needed to maintain the war effort. As more and more white men were sent overseas as soldiers, more jobs were becoming available. Opportunities such as schooling, education, and safety were offered more in the North compared to in the South.
But due to the growing threat of living in the South as a black person, people began to move to the North in the hopes that they could escape the race riots and the threat of joblessness. This movement became known as the Great Migration.
Didn't that last more than 50 years?
Yes, it did. It led to black people finding themselves in communities where they can be around people who shared their experiences as black people in America. In the South, black people lived far apart from one another. So now they moved to the North, they were closer, they could talk about their experiences and build off each other, causing a boom in cultural expression. Here's a personal statement from a black writer, Dorothy West, during this time.
My mother told us that New York was not like Boston. They were all real prejudiced, and so on, and warned us all about that. We went on to the subway and got off in Harlem, and there were all these colored people all over the place. Of course, we fell, as everybody does, in love with New York. We were all the same one, and we all had some ambitions. Writers or painters or so forth. We had all come from small towns. We were free.
There were many reasons to leave the South, but hearing about the community and togetherness that was possible in the North, people were pulled there.
Why is it called the Harlem Renaissance if they moved north into many cities?
That's because while black people moved all over North, a big group settled in Harlem. And with the boom in cultural expression, people began to create artwork such as music, paintings, poems, writings, and plays that showed increasing black pride. It was a time of creativity and new knowledge. A renaissance. This did happen all over North, but the central place was in Harlem. Black people began moving to Harlem after many were displaced due to the construction of Pennsylvania Station and the abundant job opportunities in New York. More artists came to Harlem to work, and because of the Savory nightclub in Harlem, which let them dance and express themselves regardless of race.
To add to that, Duchess Harris, a historian who focuses on African American history, argues that the Harlem Renaissance set the stage for the civil rights movement. Black artists promoted civil rights in their work. They wanted their experiences to be shared and learned from. Using their work like this made it easier for white people to see black people's struggles in a way that they could stop feeling offended and instead learn. Black artists were changing the narrative with art. For example, W.E. Du Bois was the editor for the NAACP's newspaper The Crisis. It made people more aware of the inequality and injustices that black people had to face, like lynchings and segregation. To give some insight into artists of the Harlem Renaissance, we're going to talk about Langston Hughes, who is regarded as one of the pillars of his time. He was a writer, poet, and activist who believed in showcasing his experiences in his work. He inspired and educated many people of different backgrounds with his work. Langston Hughes' poem, I Too, shows how many artists use their works for social justice and to showcase their experiences. I'm going to explain it in sections.
I, too, sing America. I am the darker brother.
He is explaining that even though they're different colors, they are one and the same. He is America, just like his lighter brother.
They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh and eat well and grow strong.
Darker-skinned people are treated differently. They are seen as lowly workers that belong in the kitchen. But even though they are being treated poorly, they are still able to rise above. Just like in the Harlem Renaissance, black people are still being treated badly and looked down upon, but they are still able to produce poems, music, and art to show off their cultural existence. They are growing stronger as a culture and a people, even though they are being told to go to the kitchen.
Tomorrow I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody'll dare say to me, eat in the kitchen.
The Harlem Renaissance marks a change in the norm. Hughes is saying that though I was told to go to the kitchen, they didn't hurt me or my people. We're going to grow strong as a people, and soon we will be seen as the same. We will be together as Americans, and because of that, no one will say that we don't belong here.
Then, besides, they'll see how beautiful I am, and be ashamed. I, too, am America.
They will see us for our greatness, passion, all of what we are. not just as someone you send away to be ashamed of. The lighter brother will be ashamed of how they treat the darker brother because they are people, and they don't deserve to be treated any less, but instead as equals. Langston Hughes used this poem to express the black experience in America through his eyes. He believed, like so many other black people, that there will be a change, that one day people will see people as people, not as a lesser group that needs to be hidden. Just like with the civil rights movement, equality is the goal.
But what does that mean in today's time?
I can answer that. Through analysis conducted by Sadiq Mohammed Gohar in his article Reconstructing the African Identity in the Poetry of Langston Hughes and Alfie Turi, Langston Hughes' poem I Too teaches us that the Harlem Renaissance was a time of hope. It's a time of black nationalism and pride. Hughes' poetry contributed majorly to this, as both came from African history. Because of a shared experience with racism and slavery, African Americans really identified with Africa. And this is something Hughes explored. Africa features prominently in Hughes' other works as a symbol of hope, something needed to combat a harsh racism. However, the symbol is incomplete. To quote Richard Barksdale, Hughes' early poetry does not depict a real image of Africa, but an Africa of the young poet's fantasy and imagination. Rather, Langston Hughes revises African history to maintain the Harlem Renaissance spirit and black pride.
Thanks, Aaron. I think that sums it up quite nicely.
Unfortunately, as our time comes to an end, so does the Harlem Renaissance. As the hopefulness of the time faded, Langston Hughes wrote about the real and post-colonial Africa. African Americans had to deal with the reality that they were not like the people of Africa, but were also denied identity in America. This lack of homeland on either continent is what continued to drive the civil rights movement.
Which is why the Harlem Renaissance is so important. It gave African American people pride in themselves as people. The Harlem Renaissance wasn't just about the amazing art that was produced, it was about the stance against injustice that African Americans faced and their resilience to express the beauty of their culture while not standing for intolerance.
Thanks so much for listening. James,
Reason.
And Aaron.
signing off.